There is no question that something is here, lurking, somewhere in the darkened corners. But how will we ever find out what it is? We need to look, always, and never stop. No matter what stands in our way, no matter what others may think. Explore the darkness, shine light into it. Join the red strings and the silver threads. Everything is connected, somehow. I am Mark L. Watson. This is Peer Beyond the Veil.
The interest in the paranormal leads back to childhood. As I grew up learning how to read, I would grab anything I could to be able to read something. And my grandmother had a subscription to a paranormal magazine called Fate magazine in the house, which had stories, everything from ghosts to lake monsters to UFOs. So I was reading that, 4 years old, 5 years old. So I was exposed to the world of the strange and the unknown very, very early. The interest has stayed with me. The magazines led to books on parapsychology from the library. Just became fascinated with learning everything I could, as a youthful armchair researcher. As I got older, I got a job in law enforcement, was a police officer. Couple different agencies, moved up through the ranks. And as people I worked with knew that I had an interest in ghosts and the paranormal, different cops I would meet, my department and others would say, "Hey, Randy, there's this haunted house, on our patrol beat," or we know somebody that says they've had poltergeist activity. We haven't known anybody to bring in and look at it until we've met you. So that was my first involvement in cases, was through the police network, and people coming to me and saying, "Hey, can you just look into this for us?" So I started going out and doing field investigations. That was late 80s, very early 90s. So I started doing field work.
When the Society for Psychical Research was founded in London back in 1882, it provided a hub for scientists and scholars of multiple disciplines to meet and study the fields of the paranormal, as it was then quite recently termed. It studied hypnotism, telepathy, and spiritualism, and gathered them into what would become known as parapsychology. As study continued and the disciplines changed and evolved, so too did the understanding of how it all worked. There are, of course, an endless amount of theories and no concrete proof, and whilst the mainstream media circulates numerous shows on ghost hunting and provides its own evidence of spirits communicating from beyond the grave, sending messages, manifesting as shadows and moving objects, appearing to psychics in visions and communicating beyond the void, it's still quite widely theorised in scientific circles, even within the field of parapsychology, that much of what is seen and heard could well be created in, from, or with our own minds. That's not to say, of course, that it should not be treated as paranormal or supernatural. If our mind truly can project thoughts to such a degree, create visions that are seen by more than merely our own eyes, then that is surely as incredible as any proof of life after death. However, all that said, a true scientific mind will remain open to all possibilities without closing any avenues off. It's perfectly possible that there are many explanations all at play at the same time. It may be that there is a life after death and a way for the past to communicate or manifest, but that there's also a yet undiscovered way for the human brain to project itself onto an external canvas and create from seemingly nothing. It may be that there is life living beyond our planet, and they may indeed be visiting us, but that there are also cerebral anomalies that hallucinate things in the sky or patch over gaps in consciousness with images of alien creatures. Our brain, our science, and the massive lack of understanding of both leave much to be discovered and more questions than answers. That's why we do this, and probably why you're listening. My guest tonight is a researcher, field investigator and journalist who covers the fields of ghost and poltergeist activity. An ex-law enforcement officer, he approaches everything he does with a keen eye for detail and a critical and levelled approach, and, crucially, he's not quick to categorise such experiences as pertaining to ghosts, spirits, or any of the alike. Randy Liebeck joins us tonight to discuss his work in the field, his study of parapsychology, and how he is just as ready to debunk or to reconsider the evidence as he is to peer beyond the veil.
My grandmother, who lived in North Carolina, I lived with my parents in New Jersey. I would go visit my grandmother. She'd have Fate magazine. I'd bring issues back home. My mother in New Jersey had an encyclopedia set called Man, Myth, and Magic, which is A through Z set of encyclopedias, covering the entire, Fortean and paranormal world. So my mother obviously had enough of an interest, to buy an encyclopedia set. We never discussed things in the family. And I never really thought about, hey, it's unusual that, my grandmother and mother have this interest. It was just, that's what I grew up with in the house. And when we went on vacation to my grandmother's. So it was, when I was exposed to it early on, I just didn't think of anything unusual about it. I just thought it was some fascinating stuff. I found out later in adult life that my mother had some paranormal experiences, and that in our family, my mother's grandmother, who lived in, I believe, rural eastern Tennessee, up in the mountains, she had a reputation back in the old days of being a wise woman, what we might call a witch or a healer, somebody who had psychic abilities, and folks would go to her, to find out, what was going to happen with their lives, how the crops were going to turn out. So I never knew that, growing up. It's just stuff I found out, more recently, talking with family members. I wish I knew, early on. Yes, my mother's no longer with us, and I wish I had, an opportunity to go more in depth about her experiences. I know she had seen a ghost once or twice, had poltergeist activity happen in the house that I grew up in, but just was not aware of it at the time. And I wish I had more of an opportunity to, get the fine details about it. Apparently, it wasn't just my great grandmother who had abilities. Apparently, there is a family a tradition of that to some degree, but unfortunately, I don't know all the fine details. As a young child, I may or may not have had a strange experience. I did not even remember this for years, and people asked me, how I got interested, and I would just say from reading stuff. But there was an ongoing incident in my youth. I don't know how old I was, but I was in a crib, so I was pretty little. Crib with the typical vertical wood slats, so you don't fall out of the crib. And my crib was pushed up against the wall, so I could reach through the wood slats and touch the wall in the bedroom I was in. And I have a distinct memory of tapping on the wall between the wood slats of the crib, tap, 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 tap. And I remember my mother coming into the room, goes, "Why in God's name are you rapping on the wall?" And I remember my response was, "Oh, I'm talking to the ghosts that live in the wall." And I rap and they rap back at me. I have no memory of why I was doing that, what the instigation was, but I distinctly remember that I would rap on the walls. That the purpose was to talk with the ghosts who lived in the wall. And I remember explaining that to my mother, who just rolled her eyes and left to my own devices. This apparently went on for a while. It was not like a one-time thing on one day. I had, I would rap with the ghosts. The one thing that intrigues me more than the other things is that, as an infant, apparently I had enough of a conceptual awareness of the concept of a ghost to be able to tell my mother that's what I was doing and that's what I was communicating with. I don't know where, that knowledge of even that word came from, or even applying that word to a particular situation. And for some reason, I was knocking on the wall with the understanding that something was knocking back at me. That might have been just, childhood imagination, the line between reality and fantasy, and in a brain, that young and undeveloped, the line is not that solid. So I could have been, having, very strong imagination that I'm talking with ghosts, because maybe I saw them on a movie where they were rapping on a wall or something. I don't remember. So I really cannot apply any validation to this or even make a judgment call. Was there anything really happening?
There's two ways of looking at it. You of course, from a critical, from a cynical, from a skeptical perspective, could put forth the argument you just did, that actually it's the infant mind, it's the childhood imagination, and that can pretty much excuse any flight of fancy that the mind might have, because you're just young. So we shrug that off. He's too young. And of course, it's supposition, as you just proclaimed, that actually the opposite way of looking at it being the infant mind and the young mind is so open, and it has been proof might not be the word, but it's been proved on many times in many different ways, that actually that juvenile mind is way more open to these things, and is a blanker canvas for something like spirit communication than a tainted adult mind is. So clearly you're not going to know one way or the other, and there's no way to ever kind of put that argument to bed. But
true, but I agree with you completely. The study of the literature of the field does strongly indicate that children are more perceptive to these experiences, and then grow out of it after a certain age. And there are two ways you can look at that, assuming that it is a real, objective thing they're experiencing. One is that they have not been told yet that there are no such things as ghosts, and they experience what they experience just naturally, and tell people about it or not. But as you get older, the adults, when you're young, the adults just look at you and smile and go, "Yes, Randy, you saw a ghost. Good for you." But as you get older and you tell those stories, the adults will pull you aside and say, "Hey, stop saying crap like that. People are going to think you're crazy. There are no such thing as a ghost. You have not seen a ghost. Stop saying that." After you've been told that enough times, you're going to stop saying it, and then you may actually stop seeing it as you block that out as a self-protective mechanism, so you don't get yelled at. The other factor that may play into it is developing brains change neurologically, physically, and chemically. The connections of the nerves and the synapses develop and change as we get older. I think your brain does not stop fully forming until you're in your 20s, and then it's set however it's going to be set. It's quite possible that in the earlier stages of neural development that we are physically more sensitive to picking up things in our environment, and we lose that sensitivity to a degree as we get older. And it may be a combination of that and the social programming that we all get as kids. There are no ghosts. People are going to say you're crazy. So that
Sure.
could apply to my situation. I just, I have no, as you said, I have no way to evaluate that.
Sure. It's interesting. I've been reading quite a lot quite recently, really extensive multi-year studies into children with memories of previous lives, of pre-birth memories, which I know to many people sounds very wacky, but really odd stories coming out of those studies of children who remember being in a certain place, before they were inside their mother, certain memories of kids picking mums, really, really weird things that's a conversation for another day. But children whose memories, when they come forward with these memories at 3, 4, whenever they can first start to articulate, they are encouraged to continue talking about them to either the parents or to the researchers. It's not something that they're told, hey, don't talk about that. However,
depends on the culture, depends on where they are.
Sure. But in some of these studies, actually, some of these kids have been encouraged to consider to continue remembering and trying to shed more light on it. And still, by age 6, 7, the memory goes, even when encouraged, which would lend to what you were just saying, that it is absolutely cultural shaping, but that actually there is something chemical and physical to it as well, where the brain is developing to a point where, as you say, the synapses have just changed. They've just grown into an adult mind, and an adult mind just functions in that slightly different way, which doesn't allow that memory to exist, for example. And that's quite a niche example, but it shows that there is possibly more to it than just being told to stop talking about ghosts. That it's maybe beyond your control.
I've been intrigued for a long time by children, infants, babies who seem to be reacting to and having, baby talk conversations with somebody or something in the room. I've had so many friends who've had, babies, something I've been able to avoid in my life up to this point, but most of my friends have had kids, and I've gotten so many calls, the baby's in the crib and she's, looking up and trying to reach up, like reacting to something or someone, and talking, in baby talk, specifically reacting. And I've told them, hey, as best as you can, keep a log of this, write down when this is happening, who else is in the house, if there's anything on the TV in another room the kid might be hearing. One of my friends, I loaned him some of my equipment that I use to detect environmental anomalies, just to see if maybe, when the kid was, reacting to somebody, I trying to reach out and touch somebody to see if maybe there was some fluctuation in the local electromagnetic field or something going on. And we could never time it so that he had the equipment in his hand, when he saw the baby doing this. But that's a universal phenomenon that people, the babies and animals, animals react to things that you and I can't see. Sure. And that's happened enough that I've experienced. I've been in haunted houses where a dog was a resident in the house, and the dog, would normally, go throughout the house, go everywhere in the house. But when we have a haunted basement, and the homeowner would say, whenever the activities in the basement, Rex, the dog, refuses to go down there, but Rex is going down there with us until the one night when we hear sounds in the basement. Rex stands at the top of the stairs, just barking and, going into like an attack posture. And when we do go down the stairs, the dog refuses to follow us, but it has up until that point. I think the best ghost detector to bring on a case, forget magnetometers and infrared cameras, bring a baby on one shoulder and a dog on the other shoulder.
I mean, I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I can tell you, when you know them inside out, as of course you do your own children, I would be able to say, if when mine's standing up in the cot and he's garbling away, I can tell you when that's normal and when that is not normal. So when these parents say he wouldn't usually do that, it's so easy for everyone. So even when you've got kids, to look at someone else's kids and saying, oh, well, I know, but kids do weird. When it's your kid, I can tell you, I would know, looking at my child on a baby monitor, his behavior, that was a reaction to something, somebody, some external stimulus, and not just him standing up, or you would know.
A parent's going to know.
The same with your dog.
Normal.
I don't know if you have a dog, but I also have a dog, and I would know. I would know his behavior, the way he stands, the way he barks, because I've lived with him for 8 years. So you would know. As a parent, you would know. As a dog owner, you would know. As a horse owner, you know when that animal knows there's something wrong or different or anomalous. So
yeah, babies and dogs definitely have a sensitivity. And the babies, it continues till, like you said, about 4, 5, maybe 6, and it dies out. And yes, I am aware of the correlation with the reincarnation studies. That's not my field of specialization, but I've read the articles in the parapsychology journals. Dr. Ian Stevenson did a lot of the initial groundbreaking work in that field. It's been taken up by other parapsychologists. Something seems to be going on. In some cultures, the kids are actually pushed in that direction. I know some of the Hindu nations, there is a family incentive for the child to remember a past life as being in an affluent family in a higher economic and cultural strata. In other cases, that's not there, and then that's not present in other countries. You have in India, reincarnation is accepted. It's part of the religious culture. And if kids start talking about that, it's encouraged, or at least not discouraged. In the US, there's not that religious baggage around it. And in the US or the UK, if children start talking about these past life regressions, I'm more interested in that, because there's not the cultural expectation for them to have these memories. But on the flip side, when they start talking about those memories, the parents are going to say, quit talking nonsense, you're making this up. Or a school teacher will say, little Bobby, goes to school and tells lies to all of his classmates. So I would not be surprised if, the memories may naturally fade away around 6 years old. I think in Western countries, those memories may be just socially pushed out of the kid well before that, as they learn they're going to get yelled at or called liars. Same as seeing ghosts. Well, I've worked one haunting case in the UK. I was there for a week investigating a haunted manor in Gloucestershire near the Welsh border, which made me realize the biggest difference is that you guys have had a country a lot longer than we have, and you have buildings that have been around and have been occupied for a lot longer than our oldest structures are. The house I investigated was, the story is it's the oldest continuously occupied house in England. It's been around since the Saxon days, portions of the structure. So if hauntings are caused, there are two explanations or two hypotheses for hauntings. One is that's a ghost, that's a surviving human consciousness or spirit, which is in the environment and interacting with us. The other hypothesis is that's just a residual recording of past events, past emotions, trauma that record themselves in the environment. And when the right person or child or dog who is sensitive to picking up on that goes into that environment, they can decode it and play it back and have an experience. Whichever of those explanations is the appropriate theory, and I think they both apply depending on the specific case. If it's an environmental recording, that events, history, people's lives, their emotions, their trauma records itself in the environment of a building or a cave or a plot of land. Folks in the UK have been at that land longer than we have, than at least the European settlers in the US have. Of course, we had Native Americans here for a long time who had experiences also. But you guys have had more time for recordings to be made. If ghosts are dead people coming back, you guys have had more battles, more deaths than we had in the US. In the US, we've had the Revolutionary War, the Civil War in the 1800s. You guys have had much longer history of battles, conquests, traumatic death and emotion. So more time, more opportunities for a ghost to be created, however that could work. So a large part of the difference is physical, the structures in the land. The other difference, I think, historically has been in the approach of investigators. UK investigation technique, and I have to say historically, has been oriented towards the spiritualist approach. The early investigations by the Ghost Club, by the Society for Psychical Research, focused on medium studies, seances, trying to determine evidence of the existence of surviving human spirits, with a holistic approach. Going in, observing a seance, seeing if contact could be made, going to a haunted house, having a vigil overnight, in a room, staying quiet, see what you can experience. That's the traditional historic image of ghost hunting that's been written about for hundreds of years. The US approach has historically been different. The US approach was more parapsychology than psychical research. Our formative impetus into this arena was laboratory based. The American Society for Psychical Research, which sort of spun off from the British SPR in the 1800s, followed the spiritualist approach also, following SPR guidelines. But very quickly, as we moved into the 20th century, it moved to laboratory interest in ESP, clairvoyance, precognition, psychokinesis in some case, where the focus on it was not, hey, let's investigate dear Aunt Edna coming back from the grave. Let's investigate the human mind and how we interact with the environment, and why we perceive these things, which may not objectively be there, or if there is something there, how it interacts with human neurology and psychology, a clinical aspect. And the admittedly romantic approach of, hey, let's go out on a ghost vigil and see if we can contact your dear deceased family member, that fell through the wayside in the US to a large degree. After we went through our wave of spiritualism in the US in the 1800s, following the example of the UK. Then during the First World War, there was a resurgence because so many people were killed overseas in battle. So many widows were left behind. There became a cottage industry of alleged mediums who would say, "Hey, we'll try to contact your deceased husband," and the bulk of that was, of course, fraudulent, maybe with sporadic, real incidents occurring. But after the First World War, we shifted very quickly into, let's leave the ghost part out of it, and let's look at ESP, telepathy, psychokinesis as an explanation for these things, to the point that today most researchers, most parapsychologists, I'm talking people who have an academic background, academically credentialed, who work from an institution or a university setting and apply the scientific method. Most of the folks who are parapsychologists in the US, most of them don't believe in ghosts. A handful are open to the possibility, but most are into lab ESP studies. A smaller group will look at ghost hauntings and poltergeists. Out of that group, most of them do not believe it's spiritual or survival of the human spirit. They believe it's other explanations. Now there are a few, I know and have worked with a few who are open to the idea, hey, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, let's assume it might be a duck. It might actually be a ghost as we define that. But it's a minority, and these folks are working, out of a lab or out of the university. Far fewer labs and universities today than we've had in the past. But most of them are not doing field investigations. They've abandoned spontaneous paranormal field investigations. And they may say, they may write a journal article. They may give an interview to the media. Well, a ghost may be, a dead person coming back. But they're not actually going out to haunted houses, except for a couple of people who are still doing that. They've abandoned the field to the lay amateur researcher, which is not, and it's by itself a bad thing. There have never been enough scientists to go out and handle all these investigations. So you need amateurs who have some knowledge of the field and have knowledge of investigative techniques, who have the ability not to be too credulous and to be able to be discriminating in what they're looking for and what their observations are. The problem is in the US, the field has been taken over by thousands of amateur ghost hunting groups with no training, with no knowledge of psychology, neurology, physics. They have no idea that this has been investigated for hundreds of years. They have no idea, that the SPR exists, that the American branch exists. They have no idea that J.B. Ryan has studied parapsychology, that there is a theory for poltergeists called recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, which relies on a human being affecting the environment as opposed to a ghost affecting the environment. They have no knowledge of this. They're out looking for phenomena that we do not think you legitimately find in real cases. They're running around graveyards, taking digital photographs of dust particles that are illuminated by their flashes and screaming, "Oh my God, look at all these ghost orbs I photographed." And that's what the field has degenerated to here. In the UK, there is still the SPR. There's a group called ASAP, the Association for Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, which is a very credible, scientifically oriented group. And what they do is they train investigators from the UK's myriad, of amateur ghost hunting groups. But they're given some basic training on how to do an investigation, what evidence is and what it is not, what the different theories are. So these guys are not just going in cold. In the US, we have nothing that even approaches that. There is no national body. We used to have an American SPR that is now totally defunct and never really got involved in field work in the get-go. So in the UK, there are a lot. I think about Yvette Fielding and Most Haunted, running around screaming in a dark, castle at night. You guys have that, too, just like we do. But you also have trained investigators. You have national organizations which set up some standards for training, for investigative protocols, and for ethics in doing investigations. We do not have that in the US, and it's obvious.
I
The
don't
field is not in
think
good shape.
I don't think the explosion of network TV and its fascination with these shows has helped one bit. In fact, I'll tell you it hasn't. Because you now have these TV ghost hunters going out and I don't want to say faking evidence, though I know for a fact at times they absolutely do, and making millions, making themselves big names, attracting massive followings. And to the layperson, they're showing that actually, look, if you go to a haunted house and you bring some of this kit with you and you ask the right questions and you do the right things, you can get this evidence, in inverted commas, of ghosts, in inverted commas. And what that's doing is that's showing the masses, the mass population, that you can go and do that. Actually, what a lot of people, and it's widely recognized, but what a lot of people aren't seeing is that's made for TV. I'm not saying it's entirely fabricated viewing, but it is somewhat fabricated viewing, and it is certainly heavily, heavily edited and tainted viewing, which is not painting the accurate picture. So you have, as you said, these thousands of ghost hunting groups who are springing up, who are going out thinking the orb is this and the noise is that, because that's what TV is showing them it is. And I think actually behind that massive veneer, which is probably more than a veneer, it's about an inch here on the front of it all, the smarter minds behind it, even over here, are now saying, yeah, but that's not what this is. It is coming, it may be from a spirit, and it may be from a spirit of the dead, but it may be only able to be perceived in your own mind. And the research going into these things is A, fascinating, B, in its infancy, despite the fact that the SPR is 200 years old, but shows that actually the science behind it is nowhere near where it needs to be to actually explain these things. And so to think that it's a spirit of the dead, sure, could well be. And I'm not saying it's not. And I'd like to think it would be. That would be lovely to think that they're able to go to a place where they can then communicate back. And I'm certainly in no place to rule that out. But what I think the conclusion, the amateur halfway through our research conclusion has to be is we don't know anything like what we need to know in order to form an actual scientific conclusion of this. And that's why that level of research into the consciousness aspect of it must continue as a priority over trying to get voices, because it's all good going into a haunted house and capturing a voice, capturing a shadow. Until you can rule out the human aspect of that, then you can't rule in anything else.
Well, we know that you don't have a haunting that's reported or a poltergeist that's reported unless you have a human experiencer or witness who experiences it and tells somebody. So you have the human factor, that human consciousness has to be present in the location to perceive the activity, or there's nothing to investigate, there's nothing to follow up on. You don't have an experience. And you experience things through your senses and through the sensory processing areas of your brain. It is the interaction of mind and body, how the eyes, send a signal to the brain, how your ears send a signal to your brain to process that. It seems that in some of these cases, we're dealing with phenomena which is by definition at least partially hallucinatory. That you're seeing something, but there's not an object there that's reflecting light to your eyes. The image is being sent, bypassing the physical senses, and is being sent and processed directly in the sensory processing areas of the brain. So we cannot understand what's at play, what this phenomena might be, unless we are looking at human neurology, human psychology, because everything we experience is interpreted by us, by our cultural, religious expectations and our past experiences. So it involves psychology, neurology. It's going to involve consciousness studies. There seems to be some suggestive evidence that your human consciousness, that which makes us what we are, whether you want to call it spirit, soul, consciousness, there is some evidence that it seems to be able to exist, at least temporarily, separate from the physical body, through an out-of-body experience, through a near-death experience. There's suggestive evidence. So if that can happen while you're still alive, maybe it can happen if your body is physically dead. What makes you can still exist in some form. We need that how the mechanism of how that works, even beyond consciousness studies, that might touch into the arena of quantum mechanics, quantum physics. I think we're just starting to touch on those areas now, and we have physicists who are also parapsychologists, and they are trying to mesh some of the findings in quantum physics to some of the observations in parapsychology. So yes, you cannot just go out there and just randomly wave around detectors and take photographs of dust particles or run a tape recorder, because there's no context. You might get a sound, you might get some strange looking image, but there's no context. Why are you at that house in the first place? Have people reported experiences? If they have, then focus on those experiences. What have people felt, seen, heard? What do the people think they experienced? Why do they call us up and say it's paranormal? Why are they applying that label to it? This is a multidisciplinary field of study. Some people are specialists in one area. Not everybody is a jack of all trades, but you have to be to a degree. You at least have to be aware that there's a physics aspect, that there is a neurology aspect. Hopefully consult with people who are experts in those fields if something happens on your case that really seems to impact in that area. But it's much more than running a tape recorder. and hearing, a rustling sound on it and screaming, to the TV cameras, "Oh my God, there's a demon in the basement."
Yeah.
That's not what I do. It's not what my colleagues do. Unfortunately, there are thousands of people out there who that is exactly what they do, because their only education, their only knowledge of the field is what they see on these television shows. That's all they're exposed to. They've never read a book on the subject. They don't subscribe to the SPR journal. They are just clueless, and they think that going into a house for a few hours overnight in the dark, and there is no logical reason to do an investigation in the dark. You're just going to wind up hurting yourself. But they think, yeah, you come in and a ghost is identified, proven to exist, and then resolved one way or the other before the end credits roll. And that happens every week on demand on like 10 to 15 different TV shows. You have there are several in the UK, several in the US. They're all doing this every week, and every week they're finding a ghost, or now more commonly demons in the basement. People watch that, that's all they know. And then these folks are running out doing what they call investigations. And it's causing, I'm afraid at this point, possibly irreparable damage to legitimate psychical research. It's becoming not just a joke to the general public, but it's becoming a joke to those of us who have a real serious interest in the field. Well, I got contacted by Channel 4 in London. They had been contacted by the Macer Wright family, who had lived at the hall for quite a while. The current homeowner, Donald, had grown up as a child living in the house, had been in the family all of his life. And they'd experienced stuff in the house. Donald told me stories of how, as a child, he'd be in his bedroom and he would hear footsteps walking across his bedroom floor towards his bed, which is interesting because his floor was carpeted, but he heard footsteps on a wood floor, which on first appearance indicates it's some sort of environmental recording of a past experience of somebody walking across the floor before it had a carpet. But he would have that happen regularly, and sometimes it would approach the bed, and I believe he reported they would pull the blankets off of him at night and scare the heck out of him, which is not a residual haunting. Residual recordings in the environment do not pull your bedclothes off of you. So it was not just a recording of past events. But many things happened to him, his other family members. They had staff that worked at the house, working in a gift shop, because the house was also a museum due to its history. There was a stables. There was a woman who worked in the stables, and she reported that she was working there one evening, and she saw a black misty cloud materialize in the corner of the stable, and the cloud enveloped her, and she felt it choking her, and she couldn't breathe. And she started screaming and flailing, and then she watched the thing just dissipate. The house had been haunted for hundreds of years, if not longer. There were reports that we found in the local historical archives that the local church held of people reporting ghostly activity going back at least to the 1800s, possibly more. Several different hauntings, different apparitions had been seen. So the place is very haunted, but it was primarily a residual recording type haunting. People were seeing events from the past playback. Soldiers from the Civil War, having a sword fight, soldiers marching across the lawn, then walking through a wall and disappearing. But the phenomena had been taking a more physical path lately. The woman in the stables being assaulted, Donald, his childhood memories of the covers being pulled off. the phenomena seemed to be increasing and changing the dynamics a little bit. So they reached out, to the media, saying if they could find some ghost hunters to come out and check it out. So Channel 4 reached out to me, flew me over, teamed me up with a psychologist, Nick Rose, from the University of the West of England. He's a parapsychologist, but his approach was from the psychology, and he did not believe in ghosts. This was all the human brain to him. We had a person who was a specialist in ley lines and earth energies. We had a reverend from the Anglican Church, Reverend Tom Willis, who was a paranormal specialist and a exorcist for the church. And we had a medium, Maureen Conway. And I led the team. And the idea was spend a week there, each of us using our own approach. Reverend Willis would, try to pick up some sort of negative spirit or influence. The ley line specialist claimed that the house was at the intersection point of several major ley lines, and he felt that influenced the haunting. We did some historical archaeological research. There was an active archaeological dig on the site of the manor. There was a temple they uncovered, which was a temple to the Celtic river goddess Sabrina. And it had been there for a very long time. And the area had a reputation of being a mystical spot where you could have experiences, see things on the other side of the veil. And that goes back to ancient history. Then they built the Saxon house there. Then they built up, further structures. So the place has always had a reputation of being haunted or mystical to some point or other. So we spent our week there trying to figure out what's going on. I did not encounter anything which struck me as being ghostly while I was there. I did pick up some anomalous energy signatures on some of my devices, which were just that. They were anomalous. I could not explain why I was picking them up, but they did not correlate with any other activity, which told me, hey, I'm picking up signs of a ghostly presence. That just was not there. Reverend Willis told us that he thought he was picking up the presence of a angry, hostile, and confused spirit. I don't remember what the medium said she picked up on, but she picked up ghosts every corner she went to. The psychologist, Nick Rose, felt not this is just because it's a spooky old house with a history behind it. People are looking into a dark corner and their imagination is taking its toll on them. So we all, did our little input. After the week, we compared notes and talked for the TV show. The one interesting thing that happened, which was our little Steven Spielberg movie moment. At the last day, the whole week we were there, and when they did the TV show, the week investigation was cut and edited to make it look like we were there for one night. In fact, the whole week I was there, I had to wear the same set of clothes, which the production crew washed and laundered for me every night, so they could cut scenes together. But the whole week we were there, it was overcast, dank, dreary. I guess what you guys call a typical English atmosphere. But it was very melancholy. There were no birds chirping. And this was, I don't remember what time of the year it was. I think it was spring, late spring. I loved it. I love the foggy, misty. It hits the romantic part of me. But the whole week it was like that. The last day we were there, because Reverend Willis said he felt that there was some disturbed, angry soul there. The homeowner said, "Well, Reverend, can you do anything to help send this, confused person on his way?" He goes, "I certainly will try." So he went throughout the house doing some sort of Anglican minor exorcism ritual. Not the kind of exorcism you do on a person, but you do on a building. So he was sprinkling holy water and reciting these prayers. And at the very last thing, he sprinkles his last spray. He goes to all the walls and hits them with holy water. The last wall, he does it and says his little ceremonial words and says, "Amen." At the moment he said amen, the clouds parted, the sun came out. There were beams, straight, solid looking beams of sunlight, bursting through the clouds, illuminating the house. And we're all standing out front watching this. I, the other investigators, the homeowners, the film crew, all looked at each other like, whoa. Our jaws dropped because it was like a scene, from a Steven Spielberg movie. The priest has exorcised the house. But now I am positive it was just coincidental timing, but my goodness, what perfectly timed coincidental timing. It was a moment. Actually, we were kind of speechless for a few seconds. And after we left, I kept in touch for a little while with the homeowners who moved out and sold the property eventually. But I was speaking with Donald Macer Wright last year. He reached out to me to see how I was doing. And I asked him, "Hey, have you heard any, what happened after we left, and what's the current status?" He said the activity continued in the house, but it died down in intensity. Our being there, and maybe what Reverend Willis did, I don't know. Maybe that had an effect on calming things down to a bit. And he did not know what happened in the house after he and the family had moved out. They'd gone through a series of hands. It was a balloon launch center for a while. It was some sort of a artistic cultural center for a while. I don't know what it is now, but he did not have contact with the people, so I don't know. But it was a fun case. Not as much stuff happened as I would have hoped, but it was great to get over to the UK.
What was the show called?
It was
the show titled when it went out?
Yeah, it was Channel 4 had a series called Short Stories, and I believe every week they would do a hour-long documentary on a different subject. For this one, they picked haunted houses. It was called Short Stories, Ghost Stories, or Short Stories, Ghost Hunters.
Channels 4 have their online services, the on-demand services, where a lot of their back catalogue's still available. So I'm sure if people wanted to see that, they can go and dig out that episode. Still, it will be in the archive somewhere. You can still.
It was a fun investigation. It was very cinematic. It was a spooky house, spooky atmosphere, well filmed. I did not make too much of a fool out of myself, I think. But while I really wish that I had found some objective evidence of something going on, which sadly I did not. But that last moment when Reverend Willis parted the clouds, that made the whole trip worth it. Well, I've had 2 or 3 incidents which were not scary, but I think, well, yeah, one of them was scary. A couple of them were spooky. I'll tell you about one that I've not discussed recently on different venues. I was living in a house in New Jersey. I and another cop, we rented out a basement apartment. Actually, it was his mother's house. We rented a basement apartment. He had his bedroom, I had mine, and a shared living room and kitchen area. The house was haunted. We had reports of the house being haunted since the 1920s. People in the house, including my roommate and his mother and house guests, had been seeing an apparition of a female walking around when nobody was in the house. Did not look like a ghost, looked like a woman was walking through the house. And that had been reported, for years. I had never seen it, but several of my friends from the police department had seen this and assumed that Nick's mother was back home from work and there's no one there. That had been going on for a while. People were also seeing shadows, movement out of the corner of their eye. I was aware of this. I was fascinated by it. I interviewed witnesses, but never experienced it myself. home one day with my girlfriend. We're asleep in our bedroom. I couldn't sleep, so I got up. I left her alone in the dark bedroom. I went into the living room and was reading a book. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. I hear her calling from the bedroom, going, "Randy, Randy." And I call back from the living room. I go, "Yeah, what's up? I'm out here." She screams, comes bolting out of the bedroom. And I said, "What happened?" She says, "I saw what I thought was you standing in the corner, like a black shadow. And I could see, the torso shape. You had legs, arms." I said, why is Randy staring at me in a dark room?" Then when she heard my voice call in the living room, she freaked out. It's like, that's interesting. She did not want to come back to the house for a while. Maybe a week or so later, I came home early from work because I had a headache. So I called out sick from the office, came home, was laying in bed trying to sleep. My roommate, Nick, was at work with the narcotics task force with the county sheriff's office. He stopped by the house while I was trying to sleep. He came back with another detective from the city police department. They were working on a task force together. So they come into the house. I hear noise, talking and mumbling. I'm thinking, well, I'm here alone. Nick's at work. Nobody's in the house. So I'm a little bit concerned. I'm starting to hear the voices. I'm laying in bed very quietly. We'd had a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. My car had gotten broken into within that month. So I'm thinking, okay, now they've broken into the house. So I'm laying there very quietly. I keep my sidearm in the nightstand next to me. So I grab my gun because I don't want to get caught by somebody walking into the bedroom while I'm there. So I'm being very, very quiet. And I'm hearing, again, more mumbling outside my door. And I see shadows of feet passing underneath the illuminated strip underneath my bedroom door. So I figure, oh, there's people out there. There's more than one. So I'm sitting there, got my gun out. I hear more and more mumbling. So I decide, okay, I'm not going to just sit here and wait. I'm going to, if I'm going to have this confrontation, it's going to be on my timing when I initiate it. So I went to the door, did the classic TV cop thing. I kicked the door open, broke the lock, and I splintered the wood around the lock on the door. Door burst open. I got my gun pointed, and there's two guns pointed at me. Nick and Denny from the city police thought that somebody was in my room and had broken in. And what drew their attention is they saw the bottom of my door was about 2 inches above the floor. So there's a big gap. And you could see, they said they saw feet walking back and forth behind my door. And they figured, well, Randy wouldn't, even if he was home, he wouldn't be walking back and forth, like some psychopath, across the door. So they were actually going, Randy, very quietly, trying to see if it was me, which is the mumbling I heard. And then they tried the doorknob. And when they tried the doorknob, that's when I kicked the door open. So they said, "Randy, what the," after we put the guns back down and we came out of it not shooting, 3 cops not having a crossfire. I'm saying, "Dudes, why were you jiggling the door and whispering and stuff?" They said, "Well, why were you walking back and forth, in front of the door?" I said, "I wasn't. I was laying in bed, sound asleep, until I heard you guys. Then after I did, I stayed on the bed very quietly, just, trying to see what was going on." But they distinctly saw shadow, which they interpreted as feet walking back and forth. This was, again, right after my girlfriend had seen the dark shadow with legs in the room staring at her. Within a month, 2 months, the same year, I'm laying in that same bed in my bedroom, about 1 o'clock in the morning, reading a book. Can't fall asleep. I have to go to work in the morning. So I say, okay, I got to put this book down, turn the light out, and try to sleep. As soon as I turned the light out, even before I could set the book down on my nightstand, in the far right-hand corner of the room, in total darkness, I saw a humanoid-shaped torso figure in the corner that was blacker than the absolute blackness of the room. It was not moving. It was just standing there. I could see it. Even
Such a
at the
common
moment.
thing to hear, that blacker than the blackness. It's
Yeah.
something I hear
And at
so
the
often.
moment, that struck me because I realized the room was so dark, I could not see my hand in front of me. So total pitch blackness. However, I could still perceive something blacker than that, just standing there. And it wasn't just visual. A wave of fear enveloped me, a sense that whatever it was radiating absolute malevolence, hostility, and hatred, and it scared the crap out of me. So I'm sitting there holding the book in my hand. I'm afraid to even set the book down. I don't want to move. I don't want to do anything that will draw attention to myself, because I had the kind of ridiculous thought that, I don't want to notice here. I'm here, and I don't want to know that I have noticed it, which is ridiculous. It's in the room with me. I've been in the room reading. If it's there, obviously it knows I'm there. But that was the thought process I was having. And I'm sure part of that was instilled by a little bit of stress I was going through from,
You can't try to rationalize these moments.
Yeah.
Don't.
So at that moment, I knew what my girlfriend had experienced and what made her run out of the room. So I am not an overly religious person. I have a basic Christian faith, but I'm not a holy roller. But I started praying. I say, silently, trying to make as little movement and as noise as I could, just saying, Lord, whatever this is not right. Whatever it is, let's make it go away. Let me, deal with it another day, but not right now. And so I was just, fervently, silently praying to myself to say, go away. As I was doing that, I felt, and I don't know how to describe it, how I felt it. I just felt the sensation that it was slowly dissipating. I don't know if I saw the black shape actually dissipating visually, but what I recall is I felt that sense of hostility, of hatred starting to fade away, and the room got, the atmosphere got lighter. It was still pitch black, but it just, felt friendly as opposed to that trauma. So I laid there until the sun came up. I didn't even want to get up and get out of the room until the sun came up and it was coming through the window. Got up, went to work. That was an experience. 2 days later, exact same thing happened. I can't say it is exactly 2 days later. It was within the same week. Around the same time, I'm laying in bed. I've been watching TV in the bedroom, turned the TV off, turned the light out. This time it took a little while. It was about half an hour or so. And I'm trying to recall times. It might have been longer than a half an hour. It might have been 10 minutes. This was a while back. But I'm laying there, and slowly I started feeling that same sensation radiating from the same corner of the room. I go, God, here we go again. So once again, I started the prayer. Seemed to work once. I tried it again. I don't know how much time passed. I don't know if it took 10 minutes or if it took 3 hours. I really have no sense of the passage of time. But again, another segment of fervent praying. I felt it dissipate. It went away. Never happened again. And I stayed in that apartment, in that room, for another couple of years. So it never happened to me again. Girlfriend never wanted to come back to the house. I had to go see her in New York where she lived. I told my roommate and other family members about it, and they go, well, yeah, we know something's going on, because they knew about my girlfriend's experience. Obviously, the three of us have been pointing guns at each other. So that totality of all those events in the same place during the same general time period, culminating with my two overwhelming experiences in the bedroom, convinced me beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is something objectively real with some aspects of this phenomena. And while I've been, my background and knowledge and training has been in forensics, the spooky aspect of all this, I approach from a parapsychological approach. How's neurology, psychology. Maybe there is a surviving human consciousness present, but it's still a human consciousness. It's a person who's no longer in their body. There's nothing really terrifying about that when you dissect it. This wasn't human, or if it was human, it was doing a very good imitation of something inhuman. And again, I'm not overtly religious. I don't deal with demons. That's not my bag. I think most of this stuff about demonic stuff is either made up bullshit, or it's, people really misinterpreting and other phenomena. But this was another bag altogether. To this day, I don't know what it was. I'm not going to say it was demonic, because I refuse to allow myself to believe that stuff's real. It was something that exceeded the boundaries of a residual haunting in the environment. It exceeded the boundaries of Aunt Edna coming back from the grave, to check up on her beloved Randy. This was something hostile, negative, frightening, and it happened twice to me and to my girlfriend once, and definitely real. And I really can't expound on it beyond that. It had a profound effect on me. I get a little shiver now, even remembering it, to talk about it. But thank goodness it's never happened again. It was like an outlier, something totally outside of what I normally look into. And it may have been something totally different than what I normally deal with. Who knows? I've gotten a couple of calls and referrals for cases that I just cannot follow up on because I can't physically get out to the location. But I do allow phone consultation. A large part of that is just trying to calm people down who are scared because they watch these TV shows. And I just try to explain to them, well, don't jump to a demonic conclusion. Here are some different possibilities. Here's some different phenomena and the hypotheses that we think it might be. And here are some things to try, to reduce the fear factor. So I even not being able to get out into the field, I'm still doing that to a degree.
Thank you very much, Randy, for taking the time to speak with us tonight. It's been fascinating to hear about all your experiences and your theories behind some of it. It's been an absolute pleasure. So yeah, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine, Mark. Thank you.
Peer Beyond the Veil has been written and presented by myself, Mark Watson, as part of the Fearscape Media Network. Music and soundtracks are credited and licensed to Purple Planet and to Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons. All rights are reserved by our parent company, MLW Publishing. You can follow us at facebook.com/Peer Beyond the Veil, or on Twitter at Peer Beyond the Veil or at Peer Beyond 2020. Please click the like and subscribe buttons when you see them, most importantly wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps us to attract the attention we need to keep the show going, to get the guests that you all want to hear from, and to help more and more people